Welcome back to the podcast for small businesses. Today, me and Mike have the pleasure of having Neville from Cynosure Consulting on, and we're going to be talking about your personal well-being and how to make sure that you can deal with all of the challenges, difficulties that comes with the entrepreneurial lifestyle, the business lifestyle. And you wrote a bunch of smart things to me. I won't act like I can remember all of them on the top of my head. I'm gonna read out a bunch, like a little bit of what stood out to me. One thing was the third kid culture is something that you do. That's something we're gonna be talking about later. And of course, we're gonna be talking how to manage stress and the responses within that, how you go about to deal with it, because it's natural. It's gonna happen. Everybody feels it. But first of all, I wanted to actually talk a little bit about gratitude because I've seen a bunch of your posts on LinkedIn recently where you talked about gratitude. So, how has gratitude helped you in your life?
I guess for me, the whole thing with gratitude has been a journey because I have a tendency to be a little bit on the melancholy side and sort of looking at the glass half empty rather than the glass half full type of side. And the whole journey with connecting with gratitude has been about looking at what I have and learning to accept that I do have a good life, that I do have lots of great things that are going on, and to not let the things that are not going the way that I want it to go overshadow all of that and make it seem like my life is less than it should be. And so it was a bit of an antidote to discontent and also an antidote to the comparison trap where you're sitting there looking at everybody else's lives and going, it's like, my life isn't like that. and yeah, so it's a work in progress for me because it's easy for me to slip out of that and and then forget. So
Well,
it's one of the things that I need to keep reminding myself of, and the posts have been one way that I'm doing that.
yeah, that's definitely a great way of doing it. You're writing it out.
Mm.
It's a great reminder.
Oh, mm.
But yeah,
Yes.
that kind of leads me into the next thing I wanted to ask. What are some of the things that you do to actually like take gratitude into your own life and actually utilize gratitude to become happier? Because your destiny, your happiness, it depends on you at the end of the day.
Mm.
Some people are happy with shit ton of money. Some people are happy with no money, and some people
Mm.
also just not happy with any of those. So how do you make sure to actually live life to the fullest? Is the way I would say it.
Wow, there's a whole bunch of things you've packed into that. So, I guess the gratitude practices for me is about stopping and paying attention to what's around me. Too often, what I'm finding is that I will get wrapped up in activity and doing, and I don't stop and look at A, what I've accomplished, or B, what is going on around me that's going well. And it can be very much a case of like task after task after task after task. And that gets really wearing after a period of time. It's just kind of like, well, okay, I finished this task, but now I've just got the next thing to do. And that can be really discouraging. So I guess a part of the gratitude practice for me is about taking intentional time to stop and pay attention. Connecting with a journal can be a great way to do that. I do that. I don't do that on a daily basis, but I do connect with that on a regular basis where I just take time to sit there and write some things down because the process of writing it down sometimes seems to cement what it is that you've experienced. Whereas if you just think about it, it sort of comes in and it goes out again. And so keeping a record of those kind of things to look back on can be really, really useful. Some people I know have a specific journal that's just for gratitude. I don't tend to do that. I sometimes wonder if that would be a really helpful thing because then I've got a particular place to go. But then it gets to the point where it's like you have too many journals. so, so,
I feel you
so
on that. I feel
you
you on that.
yeah. So work with what works for you. I mean, some people are not writers. Some people that's not their way of working with things. So it could be, I find a different way to record it. It doesn't have to be in writing. It could be even pictorial. Like I do a little picture here to just remind myself of something that's helpful. Some people, it's like I have a conversation with somebody that connects me with the things that are going well in my life. Um, yeah, every person's going to be a little bit different with that. Some people, it's just about being alone and maybe spending some time in nature and enjoying that and bringing the focus to the now. Uh, Other people, I may feel that they connect with gratitude more when they're around other people who they can share an experience with, or they can bounce that an experience or recognition with. So almost getting a validation. So a lot depends on personality and preference and the kind of things that connect you individually and uniquely with gratitude.
I think the writing thing for me, Mike can attest to this. Give me something that's writing or reading. I'm not gonna be a happy guy. I'm
Mm.
gonna, I,
It becomes a chore.
yeah,
It becomes a chore for some people. Mm.
I'm just not good at it. So for me, if I do that, I'm at a disadvantage, and I know that.
Mm.
But I still
Mm.
actually, and it's right here. I keep a journal that I write in every
Yep.
night, like, but I do like things I'm proud of. But it's kind of the same
Yep.
thing because I
Yep.
feel like if you actually write it out, I've been told if you do it with a pen, it activates more of your brain, and I believe that because
Mm.
if I write something on a piece of paper and to remember it, I never have to look at the piece of paper to remember it because it's just in my brain. It's there. I'm like, I'm writing
I'm
this
much the
up.
same.
Yeah, I'm not writing it to look at the paper. No, I'm writing it to make a mental note of it. And that, like,
So there seems to be a connection there with
yeah,
the memory there, and it's different because if I go and type it out, I don't necessarily
no,
remember what it is that I've typed. Whereas if I physically handwrite it, somehow it sticks in my head a lot better. And there is some neuroscience behind that. I can't quote it, but I'm aware that there is some kind of connection there with the physically writing something does do something different for you than just typing it out.
yeah.
And yeah.
And from my experience, they are right in what they're saying when it comes to that, at least. One
Mm.
thing that I talked about in the intro, and I want to get this right, the third kid culture. Tell us a bit
Third culture
more.
kid.
Yeah, third. Oh, sorry,
Yep.
I've messed it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. A third culture kid. Yes. Yeah. Basically, the third culture kid experience is describes the experience of any person who spent some or all of their formative years outside of their home culture. So let's say, Mas, your family comes from Denmark, but they live for a period of time in another country
Okay.
when you're a child. When you're a child, and that either for the whole of your childhood or for some of your childhood, that experience of living in another culture changes your experience of who you are. So, and children in their formative years are still working out what their identity is. So they've got an identity of like, my parents come from this place, but I've also got this lived experience of some being somewhere else. And this means that uh, I'm living in a culture that my parents didn't grow up in, so they don't know it as well. They don't know it as a native born person. I know it as a foreigner, but I also have some connection with my home culture as well because that's my heritage. And what that does is that the third culture kid is holding these two things of like, I've lived somewhere that's not where my family is from, and I also have this heritage that is very different or can be very different from where I'm living. So it could be different language, could be different customs, could be different money, like a whole bunch of things that could be very different. I mean, climate could be completely different. Expectations of social behavior could be very different between the heritage culture and the lived experience culture. And so basically the child is suspended essentially between two cultures. They're a combination of both. And the challenge with that is that they feel like they don't belong to either. So they know both, but not neither as a native born, even though they might be a native born in one of them. Their lived experience and their culture of heritage are actually quite separate. And so that creates some interesting challenges there about who am I? Am I this foreigner who lives over here, or am I this person that whose family comes from here? And how do I make sense of that? As a child, you're not doing that consciously. You're kind of just absorbing the rules of engagement from where you're living. And so if you move from place to place, which was my experience, um, you kind of just adapt to whatever's going on in the current culture that you're living in. And and that's fine. It's quite okay. The challenge can be coming back to the culture that's supposed to be the home culture, because there are expectations there around what you're supposed to know and how you're supposed to behave. That because you've been outside of the culture for a period of time, you've missed opportunities to learn what those rules of engagement actually are. And so you look like you belong, but then you act in a way that throws people because you don't meet their expectations about how to behave and how to respond within this particular culture. The beauty of the third culture kid experience is that you've got this sense of a wider world, and there is a sense of being able to be adaptable from context to context. And some third culture kids become very, very nuanced in paying attention to the social context, like what is going on here, and also being able to translate for people from either their home culture or their culture of lived experience as to what the other culture is on about. So they've got that they can have that ability, if they choose to develop that, to be able to be a bit of a translator. That can be really interesting. My own experience, like I've got parents that were born in two different countries anyway. So it's like my mother was born in the US, my father was born in Australia. They met in a third country and married and started having kids there, and then went to the US where I was born, and then went back to Papua New Guinea where they had met and married, had another child, and then moved to Australia. So I've always lived with this. I have an Australian heritage, I have an American heritage, and then my mother is also a third culture kid because her parents came from Germany after the First World War. So it was just like she's sitting there, first generation American, uh, and got this German heritage. She spoke German when she was growing up in the house, and there's all of that experience going on as well. So it's kind of like um, there's this mix that's going on. And sometimes uh, when you don't know that you're a third culture kid, it can feel really lonely. So it's just like,
That explains a lot.
yeah,
Well, I always described it as other with a capital O.
yeah,
Everywhere I've gone, I've felt like the other
yes,
because I didn't fit in. But
yep,
you've just explained why. From age
okay,
11 to 14, we lived in Taiwan. So I was
right,
very immersed in the free Chinese culture, not the
right,
communist part of China. So
right, right,
people there are very cohesive.
yep,
Your identity is what house you come from. Are
yep,
you a Chan or a Lu or whatever?
yeah, yep,
And it's very much, we're never going to be communist. It's
mm,
pervasive throughout. That thought is
yep,
everywhere.
yep, yep,
Then from ages 14 to 18, I lived in Juarez, Mexico, which is a very much,
wow, yep,
everything works on the bribe system in Juarez.
right, right, right,
It's not actually legal there, but it's so different. And those two
yes.
cultures combined, I grew up to be a very confused young man.
Because then you
But I
go back to the US, and the US, everyone looks at you and says, "You're an American citizen. You know how things work." And
I'm like, no, I don't.
you had quite a significant period of time where you were out of the country, and that affects. I mean, I
Um,
guess you
I'm,
missed out on a lot of experiences as well. That,
yeah, I mean the one American experience we had in Taiwan once a week for 1 hour they broadcast the Charlie's Angels TV show
all right, yes.
in Chinese. There were no English subtitles, so my brother and I would make up the dialogue. Many years later, this is after age 18, we're in college. We went back and got the tapes and started watching it. And like, oh my gosh, our dialogue was so much better.
Yes, and
And
it's interesting the adaptation that you do with that, because it's kind of like
yes,
I make up from what I know, which is not the same as if I had lived in the culture. Your dialogue would have been very different if you had done it from the US, or even if you'd done it from Mexico. So it's just kind of like, yeah, the influences of where you live change how you see things.
so one of the outcomes of that, I hadn't thought about it till just now, about that this actually is a thing. I sort of intuitively figured out how to seek out in business the kind of people I want to be around based on their behaviors and attributes, not
Yep.
anything to do with the outward appearance,
Hmm.
the age,
Yep.
or the status. It was like, who are the people that I connect to and why?
Yep.
Is this common with third culture kids?
Um, it's it's hard to say. It's certainly something that, because of the experience of living in multiple cultures, you're likely to be much more aware that there are different ways of doing things, and that people's behavior uh, isn't necessarily a reflection of who they are. So it's almost like your BS meter. It kind of goes a little bit,
Yeah,
a little bit.
that's what I've called it.
Yeah. So it's a little bit more attuned to the variations of stuff. Whereas if you have grown up in the homogenous culture, I guess you could still develop that, but it's kind of masked with the whole sense of like, this is the way we do things.
Mm,
So
you don't have any
you
real data of your own.
and yeah, it's probably not just that there's no real data, but it's almost you notice the exceptions to the behavior more
Mm.
than you think about the character of the person behind that. And I'm grossly generalizing here, so I'm sure that there are people that have lived in a homogenous culture their entire life who are very attuned to picking up who people are and very intuitive in that sense. I'm guessing that the third culture kid just enhances that ability. And again, it depends upon who the person is, because some people are just not aware. That's not
Oh,
something that's on
for
their radar.
sure. Yeah. There's some
Yeah.
truly obtuse individuals in the world.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody had a picture popping into their mind once you said that. If there's one person in your life, they were just like, what's going on in there? Is there anything
Yeah.
going on?
We can,
Like,
Oh,
we can all see their face.
yes.
like no, I that's my face when I see them, because I'm just so curious. How do you work? Like,
Well,
this is so
for me,
different. I'm like, what?
for me, before I knew that I had a third culture kid background, I was just sitting there going, my experience was that I'd go to a place and I would try to fit in, however that would be, and depending upon where it was, where there was an expectation that maybe I could hide and I could sort of be the person that everybody else was. And this is a thing that can be a trap for the third culture kid, is that they try to be the chameleon and blend in, because they don't want to be different. And particularly in the teen years and in the early 20s, it's really, really important not to stand out too much. So I mean, and again, grossly generalizing, but that whole thing of needing to find your tribe, needing to feel connected, needing to feel like you belong somewhere is really, really important. So, so the third culture kid can become quite adept at blending in as much as possible. So they can modify accents, they can take on some of the jargon, they can behave in a way that is socially acceptable, because they've been observing and they just pay attention, and so they can do that to blend in. One of the things, like, I did that for quite a long time, not realizing what I was doing. And one of the difficult things about that was that there were always huge parts of your life that you couldn't share with people, because it kind of highlighted that you're not from here. And I mean,
Yep.
so it was kind of like, and there were people you couldn't, a lot of times you just couldn't gauge how people were going to respond to the difference. So some people would sit there and they're like, that's ridiculous. It's like, how on earth do people live like that? And you're just like, well, that almost feels like a personal attack. It's like, I did live like that for a while, and if I had my preference, maybe I still would. But yeah, then there's the other extreme response with the third culture kid, where it's like, well, I know I'm different, and I'm just not going to make any effort to try and adapt to wherever it is that I am. I'm just going to be flamboyantly different, and who cares what the response actually is to that, which at times can come across as arrogant and quite dismissive and aloof, and a whole bunch of quite negative kind of things can happen with that. And it can work against the whole the whole feeling of being connected. So it's an interesting balance. Now, as I'm saying this, one of the things that I realize is that the being the chameleon and or being the flamboyantly different thing is not unique to third culture kids. I think it's just more pronounced in the third culture kid experience, just because they've had the experience of moving around and doing all sorts of things. What I am becoming more convinced of the longer I explore this topic is that every single move that you make moves you into a different culture. So that could be a career move, that could be a move within a geographical region, even if it's within your own country. Every town, every city, every neighborhood has got its own vibe, its own culture. And all of us kind of do that adaptation to work out, like, how do we fit into this particular social context all the time? It's just not usually as extreme as the experience of a third culture kid. So that's kind of, I just want to put that caveat in there. It's like, just because you've grown up in your own country doesn't mean that you haven't had a variation of a third culture kid experience. It's just it's much more obvious with somebody who has done the big cross-cultural transitions that everybody recognizes are big cross-cultural transitions.
For
So
sure.
a lot of times people have had the experience of growing up in their own country but moving in multiple places, and that also has an impact on how they see themselves and how they how connected they feel.
I think most
How would you
people.
advise people that if they feel like they're insecure in a culture, they feel something's off,
Mhm.
particularly in business and their current surroundings and such?
Mm.
They feel that something's off. What kinds of things could that individual be looking for to improve their own thinking?
Um, it's kind of hard to, like, I'd need a little bit more information about the context to work out exactly what kind of things to advise in that regard. Some of it could be about the tension of, like, how much of myself do I share and how much of myself do I conceal.
Mm,
That could be an internal thing that they might need to work through. But it could also be that they are intuitively picking up something that isn't working for them, or something that is not actually congruent with what it is that's going on, what it is that's being presented in the culture.
mm,
So, and that's going to be hard to confront in some ways, because it's like there are certain cultures, and I'm aware of this. Some of the Asian cultures are like this, but I'm sure it's not just the Asian cultures that do this. But there's this whole thing about saving face, and we go and say
oh
and
yeah.
do things so that we don't cause shame to ourselves or to somebody else. So a third culture kid might actually pick up the, you're saying stuff, but there's a whole other feeling or vibe that's
Mm,
underneath that, which could be quite confusing. Um, a person who is a foreigner, like a total foreigner, and had never even grown up in that culture at all, may not pick that up to the same degree, because they're wrestling with this is so completely different, and I don't know how to interpret this behavior. But the third culture kid has a bit of a sense of, because they've absorbed some of the way the culture works, they have a bit of a sense of, like, oh, what's going on here? And it may not be a BS meter necessarily, but it could be, as like, something else is going on under the surface, and I'm aware of it because I know this culture to a degree that somebody who didn't grow up in the culture at all wouldn't. So it's really hard to give advice about that. But yeah, it's those are two things that I would probably start with. Is like, is it something in me that's feeling disconnected, or
mm.
holding attention, or am I noticing something in the culture that seems to be not making sense, but I'm not sure how to respond to it, and whether or not I need to highlight it or not, and is it my place to highlight it?
Those
And
are tricky questions. I didn't
then,
want to ask you anything too easy.
oh well. Yeah, and it's actually really funny, because I know when I lived in the US as an adult, after a period of time, I lost my Australian accent and I sounded like I belonged. to a degree. I've never completely lost my accent. So people kind of knew, and they knew this in Australia too. You're not actually from here. You sound a little bit different. And I got that a lot growing up, and I got that a lot in the US. And but then people would forget, and they'd go and make cultural references that I wouldn't recognize. And I'm just like drawing a blank. It's like they're having all of these fantastic conversations that I'm doing. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Um, and or I would say something that would make perfect sense to me that had no meaning in this particular culture. So I mean, I remember I had somebody that I knew that was we were having a conversation. I said, "Oh, I'm going to go put the car in the car park," which in Australia that's our term for parking lot.
Yes.
Now the
Yes.
person absolutely jumped on my case about that. It's not a car park; it's a parking lot here, and it was just like. I'm sitting there going, you knew exactly what I meant. You even translated it. It's like, what's the big deal about the terminology? And it was just like, yeah, it was just, whoa. Very, very interesting, very strong response. You're in America. You use the terms that we use. And I was like, whoa. It
Yeah,
was, yeah.
Americans don't have room to talk. We have some pretty funny names for things that make absolutely no
Yeah.
sense.
Yes.
If I ever
Yes.
go to America, I'm gonna get on your guys' case about how you guys speak English.
Uh,
It's
Well, it's
aluminium,
funny
it's
that
not aluminum.
Yeah, the Danes speak better King's English than the Americans do. It's hilarious.
You guys
well,
make
I mean,
up
you go
new words. We can't do anything about that. It's not us, it's you. When the rest of the world is doing something different, it's you guys that's the problem, not us.
uh,
That's some good third culture kid sensitivity there, Moss. It's not you. It's not me. It's you.
That's when you've grown up in the same country all your life. It's not me, it's
uh,
you guys. That's the opposite.
Ah, dear.
That's
Yes.
one thing that like kept going through my brain whilst we were speaking about like the third culture kid was that must be very stressful. Because I think most
And,
people can relate that like trying to fit in or
mm,
putting on a mask, that takes energy no matter who you are.
mm, it does. It does. Yeah, and I mean the stress. I think for me, I didn't actually realize that it was stress for the longest period of time because I didn't know what I was dealing with. So it was just like I didn't encounter the third culture kid concept until I was in my 30s. And so I went all the way through my 20s going, it's like, am I weird? Is there something wrong with me? Why do I feel like I'm always on the outside? And no matter how hard I try, I never actually feel like I'm in, like in whatever in means. And and there's always something that throws me back out to the edge, even if I feel like I'm moving in there. And yeah, so some of that is personality. I recognize that, but some of that was also just the third culture experience of like I feel like I'm not really connecting to the level that I would like to, and to the level that other people seem to be able to do. Um, I attempt to do what everybody else is doing, and it doesn't work, and I don't know why. Or I get weird responses and I don't know what the issue is because people don't actually explain why they have a problem with what I've done. They just assume that I will just pick up the fact that I have done something really weird and then adjust my behavior. And I'm going, I have no idea what just happened. And so then, of course, you sit there and internalize and think, it's like, am I an idiot? It's like, do I really just not get what's going on here? It's just like, why is it that it seems to be so obvious to everybody else and I just not at all clear about what's going on? So, and not being sure if you can ask the question, like, what just happened here?
So
Hmm.
what should entrepreneurs do when they're in that state of I'm not sure if I should ask the question? Ask it
Um,
anyway.
I would probably suggest that if the question is there and it's causing you distress, then you need an answer. Now, who you ask is probably another question, but I think the question's already there. It's like,
Mhm.
what just happened here? It's just like, and the thing is, would be, do I have a safe person I can ask that question of? So sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. Sometimes the context doesn't favor you asking the question because, again, about that saving face type of thing could be a big thing. Do I ask it in a group context, or do I ask it in a one-on-one situation, which is going to be better? I found sometimes being obviously the foreigner is easier to work with because I can sit there and ask questions that for the native born would seem a stupid question, but I can sit there and say, well, I wasn't born here. So what does it mean when this happens? That can be a really nice thing. But at the same time, it also just puts a little mark on your forehead to say, you're not from here, which is, if that's really important to you not to wear that label, that may not be, not be
Yeah.
a very good thing to do. So,
Yeah, I've always
yeah,
said,
it's,
Well, this is fascinating because I've had that struggle many times in business of should I ask or not ask?
hmm,
And the question is there and it's burning. And
hmm, hmm.
the one time I really messed up bad, I asked the wrong person, but then when it became obvious it was the wrong person, I tried to recover, not very well.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
said, okay, let's pretend I didn't ask that. I'll go find somebody who'll tell me. I think it just made him more upset.
Yes, yes, and that's interesting. Sorry, Mouse, you were about to say something.
yeah, what was it exactly? I can't remember the exact thing because Mike put me on another like thought.
Another
When,
tangent. Yeah,
yeah, another tangent,
yeah.
which was, I think it makes you stronger to actually ask the wrong person from time to time, because I was supposed to call my cousin's husband yesterday,
Mhm.
and he's called Jesper. So I just said Jesper in my text, and I ended up calling another guy. I knew him because I tried to buy a car off him. So I called him about another car I'm trying to buy, which I was sitting there, I realized halfway through, and I committed to it. I committed to it. At one point, I was like, I don't care.
Yeah,
But afterwards, I was like, oh, that's a bit embarrassing, isn't it?
yeah,
And I had
yes,
that feeling inside. But those kind of experiences make you stronger. I think that kind of also leads us into another thing, the last thing, because you introduced me and Mike to a way to actually network with real people. And you know
yes,
more about it than us. I've done a bit of
yeah,
research today. But why don't you
yep,
tell our audience how to use it? Because I think, just from what
yep,
I heard, it has huge potential.
yep. The network that Mars is referring to is called My Most Trusted Network. It comes out of South Africa, and basically the concept is to connect people with people and making sure that the network is made up of not just a whole bunch of profiles that nobody knows who they really are, but they're made up of people who have actually met each other either virtually or in person. So I think that the whole initial pitch was is like there are a lot of fake profiles out there, and you don't know who they are, and so doing business with them is very risky because you have no connection. You have no connection with them except for whatever it is that they put up there, and you have no way to verify who that person is and whether or not their claims are actually real and true and whether or not you can trust them. So the whole idea with the My Most Trusted Network is that you have this extension on your LinkedIn profile, and you add people to that My Most Trusted Network to basically indicate that this is a person that I have met and had a real conversation with, and who I have got a sense of is a good person to work with just from the interactions that I've had. Now, hopefully, you'll have ongoing interactions with these people, but basically what it's done is it's for me it's almost curated my LinkedIn network. So I've got 1,500 people in my LinkedIn network at the moment, and what it's basically done is it's basically allowed me to sit there and say, these are the people that I've had not just chats with, but like typing chats with, but I've actually set up a Zoom call with and had a conversation with and got to know them. Now it's not that I've gone and done business with them specifically, but I've got to know them as people and as business owners. I've got a bit of a sense of who they are. And I mean, for me, I'm a big story person, so I want to hear about the story behind people how did they get to where they are? What kind of things are going on in their lives? How do they end up developing the business that they're developing, or move into the career that they're in? Because for me, that builds a huge amount of trust. If somebody is prepared to share that with me, that says that I've created a safe space, but it also helps me to feel like I know who I'm dealing with. Whether or not I'm going to engage in their business, I can then um, keep them in the back of mind for if I'm having a conversation with somebody else who might be in exactly the same situation, might be a great referral connection or collaborator, or might be someone who would use their service. I could say, well, I met this person and they do this. Would you like me to connect them? And so the whole My Most Trusted Network gives you this platform to be able to connect people that I'm having a conversation with somebody who was in the My Most Trusted Network. So you get access to not just your own curated list, but everybody in the My Most Trusted Network, their curated list. You get access to them as well. So here it is. Say, Mike, you had a person in your curated My Most Trusted list that looked interesting to me that I wanted to connect with, I would go to you and say, "Can you introduce me, because I want to talk about this, this, and this with them." And
Powerful.
because that person knows you and you know me, you're able to facilitate a connection between the two of us, because it's not just it's not a cold call. It's like we have someone in common who actually has met the both of us and sees some value in the two of us being connected, and that adds a whole bunch of strength to the introduction.
I like this. It's almost like a digital form of you go to the business meetup and your friend says, I need to take you to go meet this third person that I know.
Yep.
I really like this.
Yep. And I mean,
I've been
it's a platform that can connect you globally. So it's just like, if you
I
had
like it.
a particular industry that you wanted to make connections in, you could do that. You could do a search through who's in the My Most Trusted list, who's in this particular industry, or who's in my location, or who's in my country, or who is dealing with this particular issue. And there might be keywords, and the extension will sit there and do a bunch of searching to be able to go and generate a list of people that might fit the criteria that you're looking for. And then you could find out who in my network is connected with those people that are on that list, and can they make an introduction. So
I really like it. I've been through the tutorial so far, and I actually have a 30-minute call tomorrow with a guy that you introduced me to through that. So
yes,
I'm a rookie. I'm still learning how to use it. I haven't figured out how to break it yet.
Yes. I'm still learning how to use it as well. And I mean, the nice thing is that you can start off, there's a free level where you can just sort of play around with it and get a sense of what it's like. And then there are tiers that you can join that give you a little bit more. I'm trying to think what the word is. They give you a bit more powerful tools to be able to build and facilitate and maintain a really strong, vibrant network.
I really like this. So all the third culture kids have a place to go.
Well,
I
yeah,
love this.
Very true.
third culture kids, but not just third culture kids. So
Well, yeah, not just, but
yeah,
This might be the place where you find the people you can ask those dumb questions as a third culture kid, and they give you a good answer. I could imagine.
yeah, maybe so.
it could
It
be.
might be safer.
And I mean, if you're in a global group, it might be easier to sit there and not feel like this is a stupid question, because it's like there might be more than one person in
Yeah,
this group
most
that
people are
actually,
like, "What?"
yeah. So,
We're gonna make
yes.
sure to have the link down below, of course, so you can check it out.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
again, Neville, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank
It
you.
was a real pleasure to having you on. Got
Thank
some
you. Thank you for
interesting
inviting me.
perspective. Pleasure is
Yes.
all ours. I don't know if you have something you want to leave the audience with before outro the episode.
Yeah, I'm just for those of you who are not aware, I'm actually wear a couple of different hats in my business, and one of the hats is called a reflective practitioner, and basically what I offer in that when I'm wearing that hat is a space for people to just sit there and take stock of where they're at in their lives, to be able to explore some of the questions around maybe third culture kid experience, or like what am I noticing about what's going on in my life? Doesn't have to be a problem, but just a regular space to just check in. How am I going? What's going well? What's not going well? What are the things that are drawing my attention that I need to do something about? And what are my options? I've had people use the reflective practice process to begin to work through. It's like, I'm wanting a career change, but I don't know what it is. And that can be a useful thing. Or it's like, I'm having relational issues, or I'm noticing something about the way that I am in relationships that I don't think are causing problems, but I'm just a bit unsure about what it means. So it could be a place for that. It could be personal reflection, it could be professional reflection, it could be a mixture of the two. And so I just open a space. I basically say the reflective practice process, you're committing to multiple connecting over time. And I'm opening the space for you to be able to just look at what's going on. Almost like a regular service, if you want to use a car analogy. I'm just taking myself in for a bit of a service check. Where am I at?
I like it.
Yeah. And so I at the moment I'm doing a bit of a promotion for people who just wanted to test the waters with that. I've got a voucher that people can purchase for 50 Australian dollars to just go and do a 30-minute session with me to explore, like, is reflective practice something that might be useful for me? And so I think I've left the links in there from us, and that promotion is available up until the 22nd of December. So if you would like to do that, you're welcome to go and book in, and you'll be able to create a time in January to have a chat with me.
So if you know a
Oh, that's such a
person,
great offer.
if you know a person that doesn't give you a wish list for Christmas, go down below and give them a unique gift nobody else has gotten them. Because I can guarantee you,
Nobody
no,
else is going to give them that. Yep.
no. So be different, stand out. Make sure to
Yes.
also like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you very much for tuning in.